Aging is inevitable, but becoming whole is not. What if the real question is not simply how many days we have, but how are we being formed within them? Welcome to Centered, Becoming Whole in a Chaotic World. This is a podcast about orientation, integration, and the lifelong work of becoming whole. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, a PhD exercise physiologist with a deep interest in the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. My guest is Becky Blue, author of Turning, the Magic and Mystery of More Days. Becky has been a guest before, and her work sits right at the intersection of something we explore often, how life's turning points become moments of deeper clarity, deeper purpose, and ultimately, deeper integration. In this conversation, we'll explore not just aging, but formation, how our lives are shaped over time, what it means to reorient ourselves when things feel fragmented, and what human flourishing actually requires. Becky, welcome back. It is always so exciting to have you as a guest on my podcast. So before we get into your current work, take us back. Was there a point in your life when things began to shift, when you started to see more clearly what really mattered?
Oh,
and
I
a
love
tough
that
question to start with.
Yeah. There's things in my earlier life where, my mom passed away when I was 16, and so that was definitely a growth moment. I think when you have kids, that kind of throws you into some deeper understanding of what makes life just amazing and full. But I would have to say that when I contemplated turning 60, that was a moment of depth for me. And that was what instigated my writing of my book. And I think the other thing I think a lot about is I think something about turning 60 or being in this chapter of my life that I just became much more observant of lots of things.
So your book centers on the idea of turning. What does that word mean to you, and how has it shown up in your own life?
Turning to me is, in this book, is the idea of turning outside ourselves, because I think as humans, especially as Americans, I would say even, we're very much into having our own personal improvement project, being me. And so we turn into ourselves to what we need. But my hypothesis really of the book is that if we turn outside ourselves and look to what the world needs, that's really the secret to healthy aging.
I like that, because this is going to air on both of the podcasts, of course, the Aging Well, and so it's very important to the idea of aging well. But from the standpoint of being centered, we think of centered as being only turning inward, but it's turning outward as well. And again, I'm using that term turning and centered. We're kind of working a little bit synergistically today with, our different kind of focus areas. I mean, yours is turning, mine is centered, but it's the same thing. It's like, what are we centered on? Are we centered on others? Are we centered on ourselves? It really should be kind of a little bit of both, where we're looking at what I've come to, one of my mantras is I am third. And I've struggled over time with this balance between kind of the self-centered and then the other-centered when it comes to that I am third. Because a lot of times when we start looking outward, trying to help other people, we tend to forget about ourselves. And if we start to recognize that people, hey, wait, I'm not getting any return on this. Nobody's really, there's no gratitude. Nobody else is helping me out. Then we start to lean back toward our self-centered. And I've kind of leaned more into this idea of a transcendent self, which is, that turning in both directions and becoming, centered in a way that we are focused on our own welfare, but we're on our own welfare for the betterment of others. And that's where I think your concept of turning really comes into play as well.
Yeah, you bring up such a good issue or a concept of how to understand turning, because I realize, and especially as I speak and face people who are in this chapter of life, a lot of them are like deep into caregiving or deep into being a grandma or a grandparent, and they have a lot of responsibilities. And so to oftentimes to the detriment of their own health or self-care, right? So I'm not saying no self-care, but I think you're right. Somehow we have to transcend that and find this balance. And for me, when I turn in and for my religious beliefs of Christianity, I lean or I'm empowered by that Holy Spirit. And so I know that Holy Spirit is there kind of covering me. And it allows me to be free. I guess I like to use that word free to just, because if I screw up, I'll be forgiven. If I just have the emotional energy and maturity to deal with whatever life happens to come at me. And I don't want to just curl up into a ball and kind of put these walls around me. I'm going to be brave, and I'm just going to go out there and see, well, what's life got for me today?
So, was there a season when your life felt particularly uncertain or fragmented, and what did that season teach you?
Yeah, I probably maybe even since we visited, I had kind of a season of a couple years of caregiving with my in-laws, my husband's parents, and it was so good for me to understand what a deep caregiving responsibility that relationship, what that does. Um, but again, I think I learned a lot about the gift of time and what it means to really care for someone, but to respect their choices about how they're going to age. And it really, I think what I found is that it's so exhausting. And so where do you get your energy from? And so I think I came out of that having a new perspective of how I can't control my life. I've got to turn things over to a higher power, and I've just got to, sort of think about what are my own choices going to be now as I go forward into this third chapter, is what I call it, third chapter of life.
So one of the themes we explore is fragmentation. Where do you see people becoming most divided or disoriented today, especially as they move into midlife or later stages of life?
Well, I look at everything as body, mind, and spirit, as I know you do as well. So, I think we could identify several things in those different areas. I mean, for one, body, think about all the different messages everybody is getting related to health. It's so confusing anymore. I mean, health literacy is really important, but now it's almost like health literacy overload. Everybody's getting so many different messages. So I think that's difficult. With the mind, I'm very interested in cognition and how to keep a healthy mind. And I think people are fragmented about, okay, should I do these, am I having cognitive decline, or is it just forgetfulness, all those kinds of stresses. And then again, with the spirit, it's not like maybe you were raised in a church for 18 years and that's what you're going to be until the day you die. I mean, now you have so many different messages related to that too. And that's not wrong. It's just that it causes fragmentation, as you said, right? And so I think what it kind of comes back to me to this word I learned when I was writing, or this concept of being really open as we get older, and kind of this generativity concept, this concept of sort of taking other people in to your life, other ideas into your life, kind of like being like inspiration, taking in breath, but also taking in all those ideas, taking in all the different people you meet, and then just kind of letting them kind of be a part of you. The study that used that concept found that those were the people that aged the best, were those who were open to all the different ideas and people in front of them.
So are you still practicing where you try to have friends in every age group?
Yes, that's one of my favorite things that I need to talk about that more, because people do remember that about me, and I love that. And I think so. I'd encourage people every year, whether it's Christmas time or New Year, whatever, kind of just do a little checklist of all the decades of, do I have a friend in their 20s? Do I have a friend in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s? You can have more than one, but I really am implying that you have a deep relationship with somebody in those age groups, so that you can learn how they think, learn what matters to them. And I often suggest that it's not someone who's a family member, that's somebody different.
Yeah, and there's so many opportunities, even getting into the much younger population. I mean, you think of, okay, you said every decade. Does that mean you have a friend that's under the age of 10? Well, yes, you can have that. You know, you
Sure.
have neighbors, churches, even just participating in going to schools and reading to kids. I mean, you kind of make those bonds and friendships with kids in a young age. And so I think it's important to really reach out across the decades and have as many different individuals that you would refer to as friends in all those different age groups. So I like that what you do.
Absolutely. And what a gift to, and I should have started with those under 10 and under 20, because those are an age group that need to know what it looks like to be 66. You know, they need to understand that, oh, you can still be fun. You can still get out and move around and go for a hike and discover what's in the forest and all those kinds of things. And so it's a real gift for everybody that we do intergenerational things.
Yeah, I was teaching the other day, and I often make this comment where it's like, you know, I relate a story or something and say, that happened before you even had a twinkle in your daddy's eye. And I realized, you know what? I'm getting to the age where this may have been before your mother was a twinkle in her daddy's eye. And I asked the class, like, okay, any of you have, mothers that were born after 1980? There's one girl raised her hand, like, oh yeah, I'm feeling old.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make me feel like a grandpa.
Yeah, exactly. But that kind of goes back to that question. And I don't know if I've ever asked you this on the podcast, Jeff, but if you didn't know how old you were, how old would you be?
I'm trying to remember where you must have asked that question to me. I heard it somewhere just recently, and I was pondering that question, and it's like, oh, I think I saw it on LinkedIn with you or something like that.
Okay, could be, yeah. I mean, a lot of people ask that question. Yeah. I think it's a great one.
And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I just, and on the Centered podcast, this is going to air just in a couple days. The Aging Well podcast, those edits will be a little bit later. But I just yesterday turned 63. And so thinking about that question that day, it's like, wow, I don't, 53, maybe. I mean, I feel younger. And I want to feel younger. And it's interesting. When I think about being 63 and how I should feel, I want to feel better. So I feel a certain level of feeling old, but it's like, but I know that I am younger than most people who are 63 in terms of just my, biological well-being and whatnot. And so, I don't know, I'd have to maybe throw 53 out there, but it's kind of like, how old should you feel at any given age? It's like, we had one guest on the Aging Well podcast who talked about feels like age. And I love that concept because it's like, from day to day, it's like, well, I go outside, it feels like it's, 50 degrees today. Right. But when we think of aging, it's like every day is going to be a little bit different in terms of how do I feel today? Do I feel like I'm 63 or do I feel like I'm 43, 53? Do I feel like I'm 83? I never feel like I'm 83, but usually I feel younger, but I always want to feel younger than I feel. If that makes sense.
I think that's true. And I think, from a clinical standpoint, it can kind of give kind of a baseline to go from with the client, especially if somebody who's maybe my age, who's 66, would say, oh, I feel 86. Well, then you need to obviously do some asking about what's going on with the the knees or the heart or the brain or whatever, it gives you a spot to start with. Actually, I'm kind of on this new thing. I'd be interested to see what you think about it. Is I often sign my books, "You are timeless," because I really believe that we all can be timeless. That time doesn't have to hold on to us so much. That doesn't have to be so much our focus. So could we ever get to the point, and I'm all about getting rid of ageism and all that, could we ever get to the point that age is just irrelevant?
It's irrelevant to me, I think. I mean, that's why I'm not big on celebrating birthdays. It's like, I didn't want to do much last night. It's like, this just, my daughter's birthday is tomorrow, so we're like 2 days apart. It's like, let's celebrate hers. We're going to have cake for hers. She feels like, you want to just share birthday cake. It's like, no, I just don't want birthday cake for my birthday. I don't need all this sugar. Let's just have a cake for yours. But, when we think of how old we feel, I think we can also take that from the SPIES model perspective. It's like how old are we spiritually, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and socially? And all of those can be a little bit different. Physically, I might feel a little bit younger. I hope spiritually I feel a little bit older and more mature. When we get down to the social side, I feel, most people probably think of me rather immature, so I feel like I'm about 18 sometimes. But it's all relative to those different dimensions of who we are. And I want to feel younger in some cases, and I want to feel older in other cases.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where the fun of life can come, because then you're gonna, maybe even in social settings, you can have fun with 20 and 30-year-olds, or you can I can visit with my 100-year-old aunt, and we're still just connecting on a lot of the same things. And so I used to do some education for our staff at the hospital on how do you care for older adults. And one of the things was, do you pick your friends based on age? And I said, well, no, you, no matter what age you are, don't pick them based on age. Pick them on if you find them interesting or have fun with them or have certain things in common. And I think we've gotten a little better with that we're not kind of stuck into these silos. I don't know. What are you seeing?
I think it's probably a mix. I think we're probably seeing some are getting better at it and some are not. I think it really depends on our approach to life. That, if we confine ourselves to just having associations within our own peer group, as we age, we're going to lose those people. And if you don't replace those with other people, then you become very, very lonely as you get older. But if we have this mindset of trying to bring in all individuals of all different walks of life and, different groups and different ages, then that diversity of engagement is always there.
Yeah, and you'll just be surprised every day. You'll just be surprised, which is a good thing.
So why do you think so many people reach a certain point in life where they feel disconnected from meaning or purpose?
Well, I think one thing is the big R word, retirement, right? And maybe we've talked about this before, but I think that becomes a very much of a milestone for people, kind of almost kind of a before and after, and they can often find that, well, now what? So now what? So I think we would all benefit from some good prep before we retire from our major career. I often encourage people to take a gap year after retirement so that they can just kind of explore and do some of your fun things on your checklist, but maybe you don't want to be done working. And that happened in our own family with my husband. After 2 years of being retired, now he's working full time again at 67. And I can specifically use him as an N of one because he is much happier, much more engaged, feels healthier, more active, when he's working. Now, that's not going to be the case for everybody, but I think you have to kind of know what makes your heart sing, and go and do that, even if it's not something that maybe you're getting paid for or that matches your resume or your CV. The other day I went up to get a package from our FedEx delivery guy, and my husband recognized him because he was a local attorney in town.
Oh,
but
wow.
he had just retired like 5 months ago. And he decided, well, I just need to do something. I love this. I just get in my truck and I drive around every day and I get to say hi to people. So whatever brings you joy.
I had a recent guest on the Aging Well podcast who, George Jarajian, who recommended exactly what you said. Take a gap year after retirement and then unretire. Find a new path and something new. And I really like that idea. I mean, I'm struggling with that. Will I be able to take a gap year? I'm. If any of my colleagues are listening, I always joke with them that, I just have to stay at work until my son graduates and I can stop getting the discount for his tuition.
Exactly.
And then so my department chair starts panicking. He's like, please, give us at least a year's notice before you decide to retire. So I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
But, at some point I'm going to have to retire from teaching. And, I love what I'm doing here with the podcast. And this podcast is kind of, what I'm planning on hopefully continuing to do as I, go into retirement. So does that afford me the opportunity to take a gap year? Maybe what I need to do is just take my mics with me on the road and, travel Europe and just interview people on the road. That would be kind of a fun gap year. It's not really a gap year, but it would be that fun little retirement period, and then go into being unretired again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the idea is to just really do something different. Yeah.
So in your life, what practices have helped you stay grounded and integrated during some of these seasons of change that we all experience?
I've tried to get more disciplined just with my daily routine, and I tend to be a very undisciplined person. But I think that has helped. I think we've kind of emailed back and forth a little bit, laughing about sleep patterns, and I've tried to be more intentional about that. And so, kind of that going to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time, and so this is kind of in that body area. But I maybe talked before on here how I started taking ballet. And that was actually about the same time I was into my caregiving routine. And that was just a wonderful diversion. And it also fed part of my cognition that was different than like keeping track of somebody's meds or whatever, of his appointments or whatever. And ballet is one of those things that when you're doing it, you can really only think about ballet. I say the same thing as like when I play tennis, I can only think about that ball coming at me. And so finding something that sort of let me think about other things for a while, it's very, very helpful. You mentioned sugar, about the birthday cake. Trying to do that as well. Cutting out sugar, being more mindful of what I eat. There's a lot of these things that I think, why didn't I start this when I was 20? But, that's just how growth and development works. You're not thinking about those things. And to be more open. I still love that concept that I already talked about, is just being open to other people. And so if there's somebody new at the coffee shop that I haven't seen before, I'll just say hi and strike up a conversation. I think you never know what happens when you say hello to somebody.
So speaking of kind of that growth mindset, how has your understanding of the relationship between mind, body, and spirit evolved over time?
Yeah, let me think about that. I think even maybe when I wrote my book, I think, and as I've worked in faith community nursing, we tended to silo them a little bit, I would say. And I think now I'm really kind of living into my book and living into this third chapter of life, I see how they're just so integrated that you can't really have one without the other. And I've been following more about for cognition, if you're learning something while you're moving, that it'll be more impactful. And so I think about that with ballet, that I'm learning these moves and I've got my brain working and I've got my mind working, and then I don't know how much you know about ballet, but these different steps that we learn in Cicchetti, they're all accompanied by an exact prescribed classical music piece. And so every time we're doing this certain move, then this exact classical music piece is playing. So you get this, to me, it's like a spiritual experience hearing some of this music. And so I would say, I guess I'll use ballet as the example of how body, mind, and spirit can really just be very integrated.
So you just reminded me of, I'm going to detour a little bit here and tell you a little funny story. When I was teaching at Hope College, my first year there, I taught anatomy the first semester, and the second semester I was teaching kinesiology, and the kinesiology was taught we had really 4 groups in that. There was the athletic trainers and the exercise science majors that I'd had in anatomy, and then I had the PE students and the dance majors who had not had me for anatomy. And I knew there were a bunch of dance majors in the class, and so my first day of class, I kind of get up in front of them, I'm like, so before we kind of get into talking about the class, let me just give you a little background about myself. Before I got my PhD in exercise physiology, I did a brief stint, performed in New York City with the Russell Ian dance troupe, and Russell Ian was the owner of a gym that I owned in New York, that I worked at in New York. And I said, and I did a brief stint on Cats, and these dance majors are all like leaning in, they're all excited, like, oh my God, we got a Broadway dancer teaching us kinesiology. And I look and I'm seeing like the athletic trainers and the exercise science students looking at it like, what the heck's he talking about? And these dance majors are all just so excited. I'm like, seriously, you believe that? Look at me. Do I look like a Broadway dancer? And I had them going, but then they paid me back. They kept, having me like, well, how does this work in terms of doing a arabesque? Is that what it is, an arabesque?
Yeah.
And they'd try and get me to demonstrate some of these things and show how awkward I was at doing some of these movements.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
That's
it was
so fun.
So let's kind of keep talking about the kind of emotional side a little bit. What role has emotional awareness played in your growth and transformation?
I feel like I've always had a pretty good EQ, as we call it, right? Emotional quotient or whatever that's called. And but I think the part that has changed as I've gotten older is kind of this again, kind of this openness, or maybe it's more of a fearlessness, that I'm not afraid of showing my emotion or being confronted by someone else's emotion. I was probably a little more protective of myself in that way in the past. But it's like, if I feel something, it's okay to say that. And if somebody else is feeling something, I need to acknowledge that. It seems like you're feeling this way, or I feel this when you do this, or whatever. And I think along with that, it's kind of just an acceptance that, okay, if they're feeling that way, let them feel that way. I don't need to judge that. So I think that's a really lovely lesson of just getting older.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's even about getting older per se, as much as just maturing and growing as a person. So,
yeah, I would agree, because I see that in younger people, and I think it's because even just culturally, it's become more acceptable to say how you feel and to be open to other people's feelings.
And so you've mentioned having friends across all the different decades.
Mm-hmm.
How have these relationships shaped your ability to remain anchored through life's turning points?
Well, I think where I go to now with that is the people who are older than me. And now I'm like, okay, I'm 66. Yeah, I do have friends that are older than me. And so even I have role models for aging, even at 66. And I think about the new book that I just sent to the publisher. It's a book about my friend Ed, who is 93. And he wasn't my friend until I got to meet him and be his conduit to write his story. So I learned so much from him. And the book actually is going to be entitled Love Like Ed. Love being a verb. Love Like Ed. Lessons for Real Life. And so that's a concept that I think I learn and take away from being around older people. And I don't know if you kind of globbed onto this concept of real life, but we know that so much of us, even at my age, I'm too stuck in my phone and on screens or watching my favorite show or whatever, that how much of my day is really real life. And so this time I spent with Ed interviewing him, we never talked about what we saw on Instagram or social media or whatever. He told me stories of real life and how he found, through lots of different hardships and loss, that he came about to find the love of his life, Rose. And so anytime I'm back into the book and working on it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what's important. It's forgiveness. It's having coffee with people. It's going to someone's funeral. You talked about how important that is. And so when I think about those turning points right now, for me, it's kind of some of those older people I hang out with.
What about the younger people?
Well, I love hanging out with my adult children, and now I've got little grandbabies. And so I think what I find from them is, where do they get their energy? And I get very jealous of that. But I want to think about that more, and I want to value energy more because I want to be able to keep up with them. So that's another concept that I kind of dive into off and on, like, okay, what can I do to get more energy? I should probably be asking you that. You'd probably have the exact recipe.
Oh no, I'm learning as everybody else is learning. I'm no expert on this podcast. I am a learner like everyone else. I'm just guiding the learning process, I hope, is kind of the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Last night I actually grabbed, this is one of my favorite books. I don't know if I've talked with you about it before, but it's called Wrapped. I mean, what a great word, wrapped. So, you're just like wrapped. You're just really into something. And so it's called Attention and the Focused Life. And it talks about how powerful it is to really learn how to focus and how that can impact your quality of life, your joy. I don't know if it actually connects it to longevity. I don't think it does. But as someone who, as I've told before, isn't especially disciplined and I can easily get distracted, I am loving that concept of focus and how that can provide energy for you.
So looking back, was there a moment when you began to orient around what mattered most? Can you pinpoint a point in your time where it's like, yeah, I need to kind of shift gears here? One of those turning points in your life where you started to orient around what mattered most.
Yeah. Honestly, and maybe this sounds too common, but for me anyway, having my first grandchild, and he just turned 2. So I realized that, okay, I want to be here for him, so I want to stay healthy, and I want to be a good role model for him. So, my greatest joy is if we sit in church together and he's sitting on my lap. There's nothing better. And then just realizing how powerful that gathering around the table, which I have always valued, but then gathering around the table and seeing little Parker at the other end of the table and knowing that he's learning the power of family, and that hopefully 66 years from now, he's doing the same thing with his grandchildren.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So, at the deepest level, what do you believe human flourishing actually requires, especially as we age?
Oh boy, that's a great word, human flourishing. Well, the word I always use is curious. I think you got to stay curious.
I like that.
Yeah, and I don't know if I need to explain curious, but I think you need to be curious every day, and don't be apologetic about it. Maybe your kids see you reading some crazy book, like, what are you reading this for, Mom? Or you're going to some movie that they would never expect you to go to. I'm curious, and it will. The thing that I think is great about curious and doing those things is that it gives you something to talk about when you go to coffee, or it gives you something to share with your kids. It makes you relevant, and I love that word, relevant.
I like that. So how do you think people can distinguish between what feels urgent and what is truly meaningful?
Well, I think you kind of have to have your little list of priorities in the back of your head, or on a sticky note on your mirror, or whatever. These are my priorities, and this is what's this is how I'm going to use my time. I get a little tripped up on that because I always talk about turning out to what the world needs. Well, yeah, the world needs a lot of things. So how do you decide what's meaningful? And, I'll just give an example. I was recently asked to serve on a nonprofit board. And I thought, okay, yeah, this is maybe something I should really do. And the more I learned about it, the more I thought, no, I don't think that's the best use of my time. So I think it's okay to, before you respond sometimes, to just really kind of calculate, is this how I want to spend my time? Because honestly, at 66, you kind of realize, how much runway do I have left? And so I would say my discernment and to how to spend my time has gotten a lot better.
Like that. So what daily practices or weekly practices help you stay centered now?
Well, again, I always mention my ballet. I love that. The other thing I'm doing more is just walks and out in nature. And I'm trying to not walk like just on the same path all the time. And just really, I'm all about the senses. So try to use all the 5 senses in absorbing my world. And I love the concept of prayer walk, where you walk and you just pray. And whoever pops in your head, you pray for them, or you give thanks for the nature around you. So it's interesting at this part of my life where I'm feeling nature more powerful than probably at any other time in my life.
So building off of that, what habit or shift has most impacted your trajectory of life?
Well, I guess that's maybe yet to be determined, but
yeah. I guess that is a tough question.
I will say this, and is that I think when I retired from nursing, that's when I truly spent time writing. And so to me, authoring a couple books, now my 3rd book, and just that and I wouldn't even call it practice of writing because I'm not super disciplined, as I already talked about, but just what that has brought me, the gift of writing, hopefully will impact the trajectory of my life.
And you might have addressed this before in one of our earlier conversations, but what triggered that interest in writing?
Well, honestly, it goes back, and I think this is a kind of a tip for anybody if you're kind of floundering in retirement, like, what do I do? Well, go back to what was something special to you in your younger days And I loved writing when I was like in middle school. I was quite the little poet, and I even still have the poems. But I loved it. But then at the time, for a variety of reasons, I decided to go be a nurse. Probably should have been an English teacher or a journalist, but that didn't happen. So that's what I did. I just kind of reached back into my childhood and grabbed something I really liked, and it was writing, and it's been a real gift.
And now I do remember asking you that question before, and I think that's how you addressed it.
Okay.
So if we have somebody who, and majority of our listeners are going to be kind of in the middle of life, and they might be in transition right now, what one practice can they begin to do today that might help them move toward clarity rather than confusion?
I think just hang out with somebody who's aging right, or who you look at and think, yeah, this is how I want to age. And so spend some time with them, take them to coffee. You don't have to listen to all the stuff that's going through your news feed about, this is what you need to make your skin look like you're 20 years old or whatever. Just find a real person or two or three, and maybe it's even just in a book or in literature or whatever, but say, okay, I don't have to be scared about this. I can do this, and I can feel even stronger. In fact, when I talk about it, you might find something in your news feed. There's some celebrities right now who are really talking very clearly and hopefully about how they feel in their third act of life. And I love that.
So what does it mean to, quote, gain more days, unquote, in a way that actually deepens life rather than just simply extends it?
I think if you can go to bed at night and feel like you're grateful, I try to lay on the pillow and think, okay, what am I grateful for today? And rather than going through kind of a list of challenges or problems that you think you saw. So just find things to be grateful for.
I like that. I haven't thought about that as much. We've had several guests that talk about starting the day in their morning journaling or just morning meditation, starting off with a list of gratitudes. And on this podcast, we like to spell gratitude with 2 T's in the middle. So it's an attitude of gratitude. But I think that's a great idea to kind of bookend the day with that 2T gratitude, an attitude of gratitude where we look at, okay, what am I grateful for going into today? And what am I grateful for at the end of the day as I, retire into sleep? I think that's a great concept.
And I'm trying to be more intentional about thanking people, so I'll text my daughter-in-law, thanks so much for stopping by with the baby. It really meant a lot. A lot of times you think those things, but you don't take time to thank people. So I would encourage people to do that.
We had one guest, Wayne Lehrer, who emails. I forget, he has a list of people that he every day will send out emails, and I think he does like 10 things that he's grateful for with that individual. So sends it out to multiple individuals on a daily basis, and that seems like a lot of work. I don't know if I could do that, but just simply saying thank you to people.
One of those.
Oh yeah,
that's amazing. I would print that off and put it on my fridge or something. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I always love when I even just get an email from a former student, because usually you get those emails or those letters, those cards, whatever it might be, at a time when you most need it. And people don't realize that if we just simply say thank you to somebody, it may be just what they needed to kind of get through a tough moment.
Absolutely.
I kind of believe that the universe works that way. It's that when somebody comes to mind, reach out to them.
Yeah, to me, in my belief system, that's the Holy Spirit, and, or whatever your understanding of it is, but listen to it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you think people get wrong about the second half of life? Or maybe even like that third chapter, if we want to kind of divide it into that.
I think what they get wrong is that it's an automatic decline. I think people see the peak as, 45 or whatever like that, and then things are just going to dwindle. So they get the dwindle part wrong. That it doesn't have to be that way. That there are so many parts of my life that I would say I feel better. I feel stronger. I literally am stronger than I was when I was in my 40s. I think I have deeper relationships with all the people in my life. And so to just, I remember back when I was teaching a lot in geriatric nursing, and I can't even believe I did this, but this was kind of a mode of thinking, like in the 80s and 90s when I was teaching, that age is characterized as a time of loss. And I would spend an hour lecturing about the losses of aging, which just makes me cringe now, because I'm like 180 from that.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't have to be a time of loss. It can be a time of gains, but just be open, because it'll be gains where you don't expect.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was driving to work yesterday, and I've been listening to an audiobook about some of the writings of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who's like one of my favorite. I love his writings as a Jesuit priest. And the more I read and hear about him, the more I realize, like, we're on the same pathways. It's not like he has taught me these things. It's like he's giving a voice to some of the ideas that have been in my head for a long time and that are developing. And so I kind of had the idea that I want to work on an episode for one of the two podcasts on kind of, I forget exactly what I had in mind to call it. I had to kind of send myself an email so I could remember the title. But the basic concept would be, are we ascending or declining in age? And I think that we need to approach aging from a standpoint of an ascension as opposed to a decline. And if we have that idea that we're growing, and this is just all part of the growing process as we move towards what I call kind of the asymptote of being well-centered, or, within the SPIES model, we're constantly growing. We're not declining. And yes, okay, we might lose physical strength. Our skin might get a little less elastic, and we get a few wrinkles. We get gray hair, or in my case, no hair. But that doesn't mean decline. It means that it's just a stage of representing that we are ascending towards something greater. And so I got to study that a little bit more, but I think that's kind of where we're at.
I love that. What I would think is that because we are giving more recognition or value to the spiritual side of us, because I feel like that's what happens when you're in your third act, is that you're spiritually powered. You might not be as powered by your body or your mind as you would like to be, but gosh, if you let that spirit go and let it do its thing, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I refer to that kind of as spiritual evolution. And I believe we are all evolving toward greater community, greater unity, greater love, greater oneness, what Teilhard called the, omega point, or you can think of it in terms of, he uses terms like Christology and things like that, depending on your faith. But, moving into that direction of becoming one, becoming, what we perceive or growing to perceive as God or the universe or whatever. And so I think that's an important part of this podcast and just of life in general, that we are moving in that direction. And if we think of age as decline, we're not going to move toward that. It's that important idea of unretiring is, we're finding something greater to do beyond just our vocational stuff that we did for 30, 40, 50 years.
I love that word unretiring. I'm going to steal that.
You may steal it. I'm giving you, I don't know if I guess it's mine. I can give permission to do that. And I'll just tell George, I'm sure he's happy to hear other people kind of using that term.
It's very clear.
I recently interviewed Dr. Carrie Burnite, who is a gerontologist, and she wrote a book. She calls it Joy Span. And, so he's removed from
I think I heard that, yeah.
lifespan to well span, health span, and all that, but, joy span. And she said that's just kind of the term she chose. And she said very well could have just been love span is another way that we could have phrased it. But I talked about stealing it from her. She said, oh, no, absolutely. Use it. I give you permission. She said somebody, as she wrote the book or started using the word, they actually trademarked the word. And she said, you can't do that. I have a book on that. It's like, yeah. And so it's just like, no, I want everybody to use it. It should be a new word for us. And so unretirement, joy span, turning, all these words are words that we should be using as we look at becoming more centered, becoming, better people as we age. So.
Well said.
Yeah. Well, I have a closing question that I always ask on the Centered podcast, which is, if someone listening right now feels scattered or fragmented, what is one step they could take this week to begin becoming more centered?
Again, it's kind of back to my turning outside yourself. So just pick up the phone, and that takes a lot of, sometimes some bravery, I guess, to do that, depending on who you're calling. But you just have to get outside of yourself.
I love it. And I think it's something it's easy but hard to do.
Yes.
And we just have to focus on doing that. Well, Becky, this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed having you back on. Looking forward to the new book coming out. Any idea when that is going to be available to our viewers and listeners?
It should be mid-September.
Okay.
Yeah, it won't be on Amazon until probably mid-December.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting it out there this fall and doing some book events and then seeing where it goes. You never know where these books are going to take you.
Yeah. So they should probably be watching on your webpage, which is,
definitely.
Is it Becky Blue Writes? Is that
BeckyBlueWrites.com, or follow me on Instagram for sure.
Okay,
Becky J. Blue.
So we can watch for that book to come out. Just watch what else you're doing. Check out Turning in the meantime.
Yeah, I have it right here. So find it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Could be a fun Mother's Day gift even.
There you go. Yeah. We're getting close to that.
Close. Yeah.
All right. Well, Becky, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate what you're doing. Just keep doing it. Keep aging well. Keep showing us how to be centered. And we'll have you on again. I know that.
Thank you. I love your work and following your podcast. So keep bringing us all the new, interesting and new information. It's amazing.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Take care.